As a Buffy fan, there's a very interesting little tidbit here. The vampire narrowed his eyes. You know, if it had not been for that earthquake, my master would not be trapped inside that buried church. He was speaking of his leader, the master vampire who had emigrated to America with the thought of making it big, like so many others in the brave new world. For some reason, a lot of Buffy fans are under the mistaken belief that there are two kinds of vampire species, minion vampires and master vampires. They think that the leaders of vampire packs are only leaders because they were sired as master vampires and not minions. This is not canon at all. Vampire hierarchies are based around individual power and personality types, just like human hierarchies. I always assumed the error came from a misunderstanding of the master's name or conflation with some other vampire fiction. Maybe, though, it's confusion stemming from a reading of this paragraph, which uses the phrase, the master vampire. Now, master is capitalized, meaning it's the name of the character. If the master were called Heinrich Nest, I'm sure the sentence would read, the Nest Vampire. This was fun for me to read because I think I might understand the Buffy fandom a bit better now.
You are a huge nerd!
Buffy gives an empty threat to kill the vampire if he doesn't leave them alone, and the vampire decides he can't take the chance and heads to another part of the party. Soon after that, Buffy spots a vampire woman dressed as a sexy Cleopatra, leading a French foreign exchange student, Jean-Pierre Goddard, away from the party. Willow wonders how Buffy knows that she's a vampire, and Buffy explains that Giles taught her tips on vampire detection. Namely, her skin is pale and she walks like a predator. I don't really like that Giles gets credit for something that Buffy was shown to be proficient in Welcome to the Hellmouth. Giles endorses Slayer instinct. Observation is Buffy's own skill. Plus, Xander brings up the very good point that seductive people often move in a predatory, or at least sexually dominant way. Buffy's thing about detecting clothes from another era makes more sense. Buffy follows the couple into the Bronze's basement, and here the writing style changes to reflect the dark, gothic atmosphere part of a Buffy episode, as Buffy slowly advances in a dark space. She runs into what she believes at first to be another private sexy moment that she's intruding into, but it turns out to be 5 vampires, including the one who earlier offered a truce, assaulting 5 humans. Because of the appearance of a sexy moment, I think it's reasonable to dub this another rape metaphor, with Buffy as the hero to rescue them from the rapist figures. Meanwhile, Xander and Willow decide that Buffy has been gone too long and decide to go and help her out. They find their way barred by a vampire couple dressed as a sexy cowboy and sexy saloon girl, kind of an early version of the Gorches from Season 3, Episode 5, Homecoming. They seem like swingers, interested in Willow and Xander for biting, which means sex in the metaphor. The cowboy has blue eyes, so they call him Blue Eyes. And the saloon girl has long red hair, so they call her Red, which is weird because that's what Spike calls Willow later on. The vampires threaten them, but Xander indicates that they have Slayer protection, and they slink off. Back in the basement, Buffy banters with the vampires. She suggests that they take blood from the Red Cross, which is interesting because Season 2, Episode 8, The Dark Age, has her fighting vampires trying to do just that. The book considers it an ethical alternative to attacking people directly, while the show considers it another form of attack, because it keeps hurt people from getting needed medical treatment. It doesn't matter anyway, because the book vampires don't want to be ethical. Buffy holds them at bay with a wooden cross. One female vampire, however, decides that she's immune to the cross's effects because she's an atheist.
I'm an atheist.
Buffy says it doesn't matter because God believes in her, and she burns the vampire with the cross. That makes the Christian themes overt, making it about the Christian God being the source of goodness, opposing the satanic evil represented by the vampires, as opposed to the subtler form it takes in the show. Buffy goes on to slay the vampires in a big fight scene. Buffy rejoins Willow and Xander. At some point, Xander decides to ask a hot girl to dance. She blows him off, and Xander grouses that he doesn't get women. Buffy and Willow glare at him. He tries to assure them that he likes them, using the same sort of one of the guys fake compliment as in Season 1, Episode 3, Witch. And then he backs away from it and says that they're good women as opposed to the catty women like Cordelia. He sees their anger, moves away from misogynistic comparisons, and then tries the same thing but calls them feminist ideals of women as opposed to the regressive women like Cordelia. He sees that they're still angry and goes to the extreme of saying that men are the root of all evil, Cordelia is a shallow witch, and Buffy and Willow are better than her. They're still angry though, and they playfully pull his ears in punishment.
ears and stuff.
As with Pike's attempted compliment to Buffy that she's not like other girls, this represents the idea that girls are in constant competition with each other, and that girls must be complimented by being contrasted against each other, which means insulting the other girls.
You know, hey, I don't know what everyone's talking about. That outfit doesn't make you look like a hooker.
In the film, Buffy says she is like the other girls. Here they just get angry with Xander as he continually makes the same mistake. The punishment afterwards is a problematic trope because it often doesn't send the message that sexist behavior is bad, just that it comes with a fee, and it then encourages sexist behavior. It's a little different here because it's a feminist drama and not a sitcom where everyone's perpetually in one state. There's a general sense of Xander trying to improve his behavior, even though we don't see a lot of change. And then Glenn O'Leary, the local madman, shows up and screams that the Halloween rain will cause the dead to rise and attack the living. No civilian pays attention, while one of the vampires verbally abuses him like Cordelia. Buffy realizes that O'Leary is probably not actually crazy, and she tells Willow and Xander. Willow makes a reference to Rebecca of Sunnybrook Farm of all things, and Xander doesn't get it. When she explains, he explains that he didn't read it because it sounds like a girl book. And then he quickly saves face by saying girl book means a book focused on a girl, not that books should be segregated by gender, which shows that he is learning. Buffy goes to talk to O'Leary. The fact that she's actually curious about what kind of undead he's talking about is enormously validating to him. Finally, someone cares about what he has to say. He's got an Irish accent, which reminds her of Thomas McFly from Back to the Future 3, and this leads into one really horrible commentary. Sometimes it concerned her that her head was filled with so many pop culture references that she had one for every occasion. Maybe the reason she wasn't doing so hot in school was because she didn't have room in her brains for any more stuff. Holy crap, what the heck is that? That is not empathetic to teenagers. That is hateful adult nonsense about kids enjoying themselves too much and not valuing schooling like adults think they should. What girl thinks like that? It's like Sherlock Holmes thinking that he needs to be ignorant about basic science to be proficient in basic detective work. And that is written to make him seem weird. People don't work like that. I can imagine the authors watching Buffy, seeing the lackadaisical teen girl archetype, and instead of empathizing with her on her level and getting to appreciate her as a person, judging her as a bad, lazy kid who doesn't devote herself to her schoolwork, and deciding to blame it on popular entertainment. It reminds me of this really preachy episode of Boy Meets World, Season 4, Episode 19 Quiz Show, where Mr. Feeney berates his students for caring more about pop culture trivia than the history of the printing press, which is only useful in the highly artificial environment of a game show, or when you want to sound pretentious. It's presented as a struggle between intelligence and stupidity, which historically has been highly classist and racist, associated with eugenics, and these days manifests primarily as an ageist conflict between pretentious adults and children annoyed with their nonsense. The people who learn all this trivia are intelligent. They would probably soak up useful information anyway. Stories are first and foremost about transmitting information, and pop culture references, story references, are words that allow us to talk about complex subjects. Supernatural Season 9 Episode 23, Do You Believe in Miracles, demonstrates this, as Castiel uses one word to describe his plan to enter an enemy stronghold in the guise of a prisoner, with Gadriel posing as his captor.
Wookie.
That's one word to sum up a complicated plan that most people watching will instantly understand and smile because they do understand it. That's how the Scoobies use pop culture references. They aren't just mindlessly quoting things and distracting from the plot, they're communicating ideas.
Does anybody else feel like they've been Kaiser Sosate? Colin may work for Locutus of the Borg here, but I'm freaked out and I intend to stay that way.
The girl makes Godot look punctual. My spider sense is tingling.
Season 4, Episode 19, New Moon Rising, even has Buffy reference an obscure item of history.
Stay back. Rob, pull William Burroughs on your leader here.
And no one else understands it because she was the only one paying attention in English that day. These pieces of historical trivia function the same way as pop culture references, to communicate ideas, but communication fails when the stories are so obscure that no one knows them, so pop culture is probably preferable. And this whole concept I just described, this whole complicated thing, is very similar to the main form of communication used by a species of alien in Star Trek. So if I knew we were all Star Trek fans, I could just say,
Darmok and Gilad at Tanagra,
and communicate that whole complicated idea perfectly in one short sentence. Even when the Scoobies just bring up things that they like because they like it, or to add humor, like I do when I reference Buffy with the editing tricks, there's nothing wrong with that. It represents skewed adult values about honoring success in school over one's personal fulfillment. And this is very specifically to teens. When it's an adult in a boring job, people care about their personal fulfillment, as with Bob and the Incredibles. Look how I communicate with stories. But a teenager has to be a productive student first and foremost. It's ageist nonsense.
You can't have any pudding if you don't eat your meat.
And when you come right down to it, the reason that Buffy makes so many pop culture references is because Joss Whedon likes making pop culture references. Apparently making a lot of pop culture references gets you nowhere but being the director of the Avengers and having a net worth of $100 million. Remember that, kids. Whew, rant over. Anyway, O'Leary says that the undead are zombies, and he refers to Samhain as the Pumpkin King. This is mostly an excuse to make a Nightmare Before Christmas reference, but pumpkins are a New World plant. Druids would not have used them. It's actually a popular myth that the jack-o'-lantern came about by the Druids, even though this would have been impossible, yet the authors seem to have bought into it. Buffy doesn't react appropriately scared, so O'Leary assumes that she doesn't really believe him. He makes a big scene, and Buffy doesn't dare publicly endorse his beliefs, so she participates in calling him crazy. Samhain's magic makes the storm take out the phones, and no one has cell phones in Sunnydale, a plot point actually mentioned in the book, so Willow and Xander head out to rejoin Giles to tell him this new information, while Buffy tries to find O'Leary to mend ties. Giles, meanwhile, comes across a reference to Samhain in the Watcher Diaries. A powerful 17th century slayer named Aaron Randall faced Samhain once. Samhain has no physical form of his own, and can only possess jack-o'-lanterns to see out their eyes, and scarecrows to walk around in. In the form of a scarecrow, he led werewolves and goblins to take over Ireland, but Aaron's watcher, Timothy Cassidy, used a spell to trap Samhain's body, and Aaron killed him. This did not permanently defeat him, and Giles knows, somehow, that tonight's Halloween rain will bring him back. Blue Eyes and Red follow Xander and Willow to the school, and they run with Giles away from the vampires. At this point, both vampires try to eat anyone they can get their hands on, with Red going after Willow and Xander saving her with a cross. This is possibly homoerotic as with Dracula and Renfield, but I don't really know. Xander repels the vampires enough to leave him, Willow, and Giles safe inside the school with the doors barred. I'll buy that show of strength from Xander, given that he would have staked Jesse if there wasn't the emotional connection, except they need to leave to support Buffy, so they decide to take on the difficult task of slaying the vampires themselves. Meanwhile, Buffy follows O'Leary to the Sunnydale Cemetery, where she gets distracted by hundreds of zombies. And here is another weird canon discrepancy. Halloween Rain envisions zombies in a Night of the Living Dead sort of way, while the show bases zombies more on the serpent and the rainbow sort. A magic user raises corpses to do their bidding, and the corpses don't do anything other than what they are expressly ordered, working off of their memories from life, but without any will or desire of their own. Halloween Rain zombies, on the other hand, are rampaging ghouls out for brains. The zombies are currently contained within the walled cemetery, but are shoving the walls in moss, and it seems like they'll get out any minute, so Buffy jumps the gate and fights them. Something I like about zombie movies is if it's done well, the zombies can look like anyone. They're all monsters, but they represent people from all walks of life. And this can be fairly progressive for bringing attention to demographics who aren't often focused on as active subjects in a scene. Zombie women, for instance, are of relevance to feminist analysis for adding female characters even to the background. Halloween Rain does this, and it deserves some praise for it. As happens with zombies, they overwhelm. Buffy kills zombie after zombie after zombie, and she starts tiring out. A zombie clown approaches her, and she sees its face and screams, "Mr. O'Leary?" In her shock, she falls into the zombie horde and starts to become overwhelmed, but the real Mr. O'Leary hears her shout and comes to save her. It turns out that the zombie is his brother, who the townspeople disrespected by digging up the body and dressing it in a clown outfit, which is such a weird and petty prank, given that it's a lot of effort to do something that no one would ever see. It feels like a bad excuse to have a zombie clown.
You do clown work?
Like I